Hey guys, it's Gary from Gary's Place here. This is Gary's Place. Welcome to Gary's Place. Been doing a few videos here. I installed E3D V6 clone on my Sunlu S8, and so far so good. A few pitfalls here and there, but for the most part, she's been printing pretty good for me. But had a little issue with this fang that I printed out, and then I made my mount to fit this fang. Um, so my issue was mainly with this part cooling fan. Um, Whoever designed this part did not give tall enough little standoffs here, which are what you mount the screws to for this particular fan. They weren't tall enough, the hole wasn't large enough. I don't know if they expected you to find some 2 millimeter hardware for it or something like that. I really don't know. But either way, when I got this installed, by the time I was able to get the holes large enough to put regular 3 millimeter screws through here, unfortunately, it split the top, and one of the things that I've been battling, and not really battling, but just more of an annoyance, is when this x-axis moves back and forth, it's a little buzzy, and I noticed that if I just put my finger right there on top, the buzz goes away. So a little more of an annoyance than anything else. This is fairly secure there, but it's just loose enough to where it can rattle around and make a little noise. And all my videos are generally 3D printing on the cheap. I usually try to like to use the hardware I have here, and most of the things I change are either cheap or most of the stuff you can print to put add-ons to here, like the fang, like my mounting plate here, my spool holder. There's a little tool rack I put on the top there. Just inexpensive things you can do. My E3 V6 is a clone. Bought it for a couple of bucks online, but certainly adds a lot to it. I mean, I'll give you an example. So this is a hydroponics piece I've printed out. Um, Now, these are two separate pieces, but using the regular 2 millimeter layer height with the normal 0.4 millimeter nozzle, this says it takes, I believe it was a day plus a couple hours. Okay. I printed this in 7 hours at 4.8 millimeter layer height and 0.66 millimeter layer width, because I'm able to push a lot more filament through this all metal hot end because I can keep the heat up, which is also too a little strange for me because I was printing PTG at 240 with the 0.4 millimeter nozzle. Now I'm finding that everything is stringing too much when I leave it at that high of a temperature, so I've actually brought the temperature down to about 230, 225, and it's printing even better. So, you do have to deal with a few more surface artifacts, a little bit more stringing when you use the larger nozzles, but let's face it, most of that stuff cleans up pretty well. So for today, when I was having such an issue with this fang, I actually bought a kit. It was $10 on Amazon. It has the 5015 fans. It was like a kit of 4 of them for $10. So I figured, hey, what the heck? I was having so many issues with this at the time. That was obviously before I got this working fine, because I was thinking I was going to have to print a a fang with a 5015 mount fan in it. So I ended up doing that anyways because I bought the fans and I was having so many issues with these. I figured, hey, what the heck? I may as well go ahead. As you can see, I'm double colored because I ran out of this filament right near the end and you know, had to grab another spool, but all I had was black. But I think, I don't know, looks kind of neat, I guess. So for today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to install this. The fan's just two wires. Unfortunately, mine does not have a connector on it, so I'm just going to snip that off and then solder the wires in, and we're going to see how this thing goes. Now, I'm probably not going to have this all on video because that would be a decently long video. I'll probably just pop back in when I have issues. But in order to install this, all I really need to do is pop the four screws out for this 4020 fan, pull the fan aside. I am going to have to remove the LED in the back here because if you've seen my video on my mount, it fits in there nice and tightly, so it takes a little, you know, you just gotta put something on there and give it a little tap so it pops out. We'll get that out of the way. I'll probably just nip these wires off here for the 4010 fan that I've got up here for my part cooling. And then I've just got two screws to pull out that secure the fang through the hot end to this back plate here, which I have two 3mm nuts secured in the back side of, so we have a nice tight connection. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. If I have any issues, I'll pop back in. If not, we'll just do some commentary at the end. And then I'll probably do a follow-up video of this one just to let you guys know how it went and let you know how how it worked out. One other thing I did note too is that these little fans really don't push enough air through to get this kind of double vented cooling going here, which is why I also decided that it was time, maybe being that I ordered the fans anyways, may as well give it a shot. Another thing was is when I printed this at a, I think it was a 0.36 millimeter layer height, just because I wanted a little finer detail. Um, but having a little issue with the supports. They're a little too sturdy. I've turned the thing down to 6% for the supports, and they're sturdy rock hard supports. Sometimes it's a little hard to get them off, and this is a little delicate here at the top. I'll show you a little close up here. When I installed this, it's got this little cutout here because the fan has a little joint, kind of like that there, where it goes together right here. And I noticed I could see a little gap in here in the bottom where the fan sits in. So I just took some, this is printed in PETG. I took some PLA and I have a little 3D pen. It was like 30 bucks online or something like that. And I just kind of tacked that in there because this is only held in by this one bolt that goes through. It was designed to be held by two, but these fangs only have the one bolt there. It would probably be a huge pain to print this thing if not for that. So I just tacked it in with that, and the good thing is that PETG has kind of an issue where nothing really sticks too well to it. So this sticks just good enough, but if I ever have to replace this fan, I'm sure it'll just pop right out with a little bit of effort because this PLA is not really going to stick that well to it. But it was good enough adhesion to get this thing stuck down in there and seal up that little gap that I had down here. So I'm going to press on forward and I'll see you guys at the other side. Okay guys, wanted to pop back in here real quick. So I got the old one off. Okay, I just left the fan on it because I don't really need it. And if I ever put that one back on for whatever reason, the fan's already on it. I did leave enough length. I did leave enough wire on there so it could be soldered back on. And now that I got that off, I figured now's a good time because I never really get back here just to double check the screws back here because this is a plate that I designed. It did go on there, and I don't know if maybe there's a little bit of give that's happened since this thing's been moving around. I have been doing a lot of prints. I want to say that I've pretty much gone through 3 spools of filament since I installed this, so I figured, you know what, now might be the right time just to get a nice little turn on these and make sure that everything's still tight, nothing's loosened up. If I could figure out what the right size is for that. Oh, looks like I gotta go get the right size. And just like I thought, over a little bit of time, with this thing moving back and forth, these are just a touch. I mean, they were tight, but not that you really want to crank everything down with this, but being that the likelihood of me being back here for a little while is going to be some time, I figured, you know what, better make sure they're all fully tight. So, all right, guys, I'll be back with you when we get to the next step. And another note I wanted to make. See, I've got this on now. So if you're using my plate, which if you're watching this, you probably are, pardon me, the 2 bolts that hold this in place, which are right here in the middle, they kind of clamp around the hot end to clamp it down to the plate. I did put 2 nuts on the back side of here, so you can go ahead and give that a nice crank. I wouldn't go too far because then you're probably just going to start eating the nuts into the plastic further. But you should get that very nice and tight. And when I do it, I go back and forth because you're kind of teetering this fang around the edge. I also made the grip where it grips the hot end back here. It's kind of like a cup like that, and the hot end just kind of sits right inside of it. I made that a little snug so that the hot end would actually have to kind of bite into it. I felt that it gave it a nice tight press fit, so that this is nice and solid, that isn't going anywhere. But again, just go back and forth like you're torquing lug nuts. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, because you'll tighten this one, and then this one will be a little bit looser. And then once you get the 2 of them nice and snug, get a nice grip and a nice turn on that wrench, you should be in business. All right, and then I'll go ahead and finish this up, and I'll have some commentary at the end. All right, guys, thank you. Okay, guys, now to the last part of this. So, I obviously, my printer doesn't have a connector for this fan. Okay, this is one of those generic fans, and they just expect that this is what you're using because most of these are for, the insides of computers and things like that. So I nipped this off. You always want to make sure that you leave extra wiring just in case you have to redo this. I would suggest using a good stripper. I have a decent amount of experience with this, so I use these, but you have to make sure that you don't nip into the wire. You have to make sure that you leave all the conductor full there, okay? Once I get everything cut and get everything stripped, I always make sure that I get the heat shrink on there. Okay, so this is the double wall or double heat shrink. There's glue in there. You slide them on the wire before you solder. Now you also have to make sure that you have them pushed back far enough so that they don't get heat from the soldering iron. Otherwise, they will melt in place, and then you'll be in the same issue as if you forgot to put them on. And then you also want to make sure when you strip, you leave a decent amount here, okay? I don't know if you guys can see that, but there's about that much, okay, on both sides. And that's because you need to wrap these wires together. Solder is not a mechanical connection, okay? That's why they do crimps. And if you don't feel comfortable soldering, crimps should be just fine here as long as you make sure everything's on there and tight. And I'm a big fan of the heat shrink crimps if you're going to use them. But you need to make the mechanical connection with the wire, okay? And that's by wrapping it together. Some people have some weird ways of tying them and things like that. As long as they're decently wrapped together before you solder them, you know, so they have just a little bit of a connection, that should be fine in this case. I know that the head here moves a lot, okay, but there's not a lot of movement on this joint. So where this joint's going to sit, there's pretty much going to be no movement other than when I'm taking things out or making adjustments here, or you know, taking the vent off and letting it hang. You know, those are going to be the only instances where you're going to need that mechanical connection, but it is important, okay? As for the soldering, after you make these mechanical connections, you know, you get your soldering iron out, you get your solder, um, and you just want to make sure you get a nice coating straight across there. And then you want to pull your heat shrink over top of that, heat that down, and then you're all good to go, you know? So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Just wanted to throw in a few notes about that. I'm a big person when it comes to soldering things. I think it makes the best connection. They do also have little metal crimps. They're just little metal tabs that you put around there to crimp and then you solder. But in this case, there's no need for that. There's not really that big of a need for a mechanical connection here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll be back with you guys. Okay, guys, so in closing here, we have the new Fang installed. I'll just go over briefly real quick. So we have a 5015 fan in our new Fang. This particular unit has two holes right around the hot end. So we run those two screws in, rotating back and forth from this screw to that screw to this screw to that screw. We got the four screws in the 4020 fan that's out here. We do have to remove the LED, which is up underneath here. For that, I just took a Allen key, went around to this side and just popped it out. That's going to have to come through here because it's wired to the same wires that this fan is on. So in order to pull this fan out, you need to pull the LED out as well. One note about reinstalling this 4020 fan. The biggest thing that I have every time I do this is because there's not a whole lot of wire here. This is pretty much as far as you can get it without it being stretched too far. But it tends to hit the corner of this fan, which makes it so the holes don't line up. So just make sure that the fan isn't pinching it. I think when I put it in, I took a Allen key and I just hooked the wires away just to make sure. The LED, the wires fished up through here, out to the back here, and then pushed in its little hole. Let's see what else. I went ahead and soldered the connections for the fan in, solder, heat shrink, and then I left a little bit of extra, which was good because I had to cut the solder off and redo it because my heat shrink was too small. I used the smallest one I had, but unfortunately I couldn't get it over the solder joint afterwards, so I had to cut it off. And I still was left with a little bit of excess wire here. Now, I am not a fan of zip tying this excess wire. It's just a little too thin. If it had the sheathing over it, I would be fine with it. So what I did was I just used a little electrical tape and taped it directly to this wire loom, which gets it nice and neat and tucked up and out of the way. And I think that's it, guys. So thanks for stopping in for another edition of Gary's Place. If you like the content, please subscribe. Hit the like button, put some comments down below. I always like getting the conversation going down there if we can. And I'll do some printing with this and I'll do a follow-up video. All right, guys, take care.